and welcome back to the band Histories, an Alien Comics retrospective. Of course, usual disclaimers, we are looking at these in the context of when they were written, prior to the release of Alien 3, and of course, there's plenty of spoilers. Next up, we look at the third series penned by Mark Verheiden and the concluding act in the Hicks and Newt saga entitled Earth War, published between June and October 1990. After the success of the first two series, just when you thought they couldn't get any better, they can't, in a big bad way. The first thing you notice is the cover artwork. John Bolton's Giger-esque tones grab you right away and promise great things. If you skip over the frontispiece on the inner cover, which one often does, one misses a pretty decent black and white alien head. Alarm bells might start to ring on page 1 though. The colours seem a little too bright, and the dude with the fishbowl helmet looks a bit hokey. And you might notice the minor continuity error, with Newt saying LV-426 was the only life she'd ever known, despite saying she was born on a space transport back in the first series, and shown to be around the same age prior to arriving at the colony. Page 2 offers a nice looking alien chasing the child Newt. Page 3, we're back to the way too bright colours and dopey looking marines and dead hokey fishbowl helmet dude and a worryingly cartoony looking queen fighting Ripley in a loader in flashbacks to the second film. Now a reasonable person could reason this out reasonably and reason that it's all Newt's memories, so distortion and exaggeration are perfectly normal. Turn the page and nope. Gone is the stark black and white of Nelson, the exemplary airbrush detail of Beauvais. Welcome to the world of Sam Kieth whimsy. It'd be hard to have more of an extreme from the best artwork in Book 2 to probably the worst aliens artwork in Earth War. Where to start? Well, Ripley's back as we saw in the last panel of Book 2 in all her gung-ho glory. The guns are missing now, replaced by a bouffant and a beer gut. Ripley, svelte woman that she is, has never looked so utterly frumpy. The clothes that change colour and style from panel to panel don't help much either. Her appalling one-piece jumpsuit changes colour from turquoise to deep green to turquoise again all in one page. Is it meant to be a change in lighting? A couple of pages later she goes from a blue tank top to a green long-sleeve one-piece thing to pink tank top in one single sequence. Anyway, Newt gets really pissed at Ripley for abandoning her. Ripley tries to fob her off before finally fessing up that she had no choice. They got intercepted by Captain Hankerson of the starship Harrison a few days after leaving LV-426. He wakes Ripley and tells her the mission isn't over. They walk over to the Harrison from an amateurish-looking Sulaco, resplendent with its forward antenna array done in delightful yellows, oranges and pinks, along an amateurish-looking docking tube that snakes off 10 times the distance it needs to a partially seen Harrison, mercifully cut off by the edge of the panel. Hankerson tells Ripley they know everything that went on from the Nostromo and Sulaco missions, showing her video of Kane's suit from the Hugger attack. Ash apparently downloaded it from his suit after they got back to the derelict. Of course, this creates a bit of a problem of the company having this info but doing precisely nothing with it for 57 years. Or maybe it was from the flight recorder. I forget. Hankerson wants specimens, and Ripley tells him to get stuffed. Hankerson then says if she won't cooperate, he'll wake up Hicks, or Newt, so she reluctantly relents. We're next introduced to a bunch of the most slovenly Marines you've ever seen. Remember in Aliens how all their fatigues look the same and their combat armour, while personalised, also looked the same, and all of them wore helmets except for the smart gunners, and how they kinda ended up being a bit of a rabble. These new cannon fodder Marines, two of whom seeming to channel Vasquez and Drake via Hulk Hogan, make the guys from Aliens look like they could kick SEAL Team 6's ass without breaking sweat. And with further evidence that the dumb is spreading from the artwork to the writing, one of them mocks Ripley for hefting a pulse rifle that looks to be about 4.5 feet long. Ripley responds by reeling off the specs and other military hardware stuff. She saw a pulse rifle for the first time earlier that week and needed Hicks to show her how to fire it. And suddenly she's a weapon expert on guns she's never laid eyes on? And unfortunately it only gets worse. They board a crudely drawn APC on a crudely drawn dropship and land near the derelict, which is kind of suited to Keith's style and comes up pretty well. Then their trackers start picking up movement. Aliens who survived the nuclear annihilation of the colony, Ripley, still in the APC, tells them. Eesh. Of course the stereotypical Marines aren't really bothered. She tells them they're better off on open ground and Hankerson, still on the dropship, overrules her. A particularly slovenly and bespectacled Marine by the name of Masters wanders off and falls through a broken floorboard into a hole. This triggers an energy surge straight into Ripley's brain, who changes from her pink tank top into a light blue bodysuit for the occasion and shows her the alien Queen Mother and gives her coordinates of the planet to where she lives. Why Ripley and not someone closer to the transmission, i.e. one of the Marines, I'm not sure. It's the rest of the original space jockey's transmission from Alien, and Ripley is told telepathically that the Queen Mother is calling her children back to her, apparently. I didn't know there was a rest of the transmission, and if there was, did the company not translate it prior to rerouting the Nostromo? Guess not. Maybe the transmission in the film is the alien equivalent of "Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi," looping over and over. But this is now the whole "years ago you served my father in the Clone Wars." Maybe. And was the Queen gathering her children back to her 60 years earlier? Or the centuries or millennia earlier when the transmission was originally transmitted? And why would the jockey warn others to stay away, but then effectively say, "Oh, alright then, here's where all the aliens live"? Yet another slovenly looking Marine reaches out to haul Masters out of the hole, only to have his brain cored by an alien. That conveniently no one noticed. Another Marine, the one that looks like Hulk Hogan, name of Falk Hogan, blasts the alien, which is now directly overhead. Not one drop of acid gets anywhere near him. Boy, that was lucky. Surrounded by aliens, it looks like the Marines are screwed. Not before time too. That'll teach them not to worry about things like armour and helmets. Hankerson lands the dropship and meets up with Ripley. Ripley explains about the telepathic transmission of the alien's Genesis planet, and Hankerson is well chuffed. He tells Ripley they need to leave. She asks him about the others. He says they were dead before they touched the ground. Falk responds by shooting him in the back. Why he needed to climb on top of the APC to do this isn't made clear. I guess he has a flair for the dramatic. Tully, has also predictably survived, seeing as she was the only Marine who had any real dialogue. The three of them board the dropship and take off. They say they detonate the APC from orbit, though the explosion is shown much more dramatically happening while they're flying away. Anyway, the derelict is destroyed once and for all, but Ripley knows the company, or rather the corporation as they keep annoyingly calling it, and military will come looking for her. So she, Falk and Tully lose themselves in the outer colonies. And that's it for Ripley's flashback. To be honest, it's all a bit hollow. To risk her life to chase after a little girl into an alien nest, then go back to the planet again to spare her further horror, yet completely neglect her for the next 10 years. Hicks abandoning Newt to a mental institution was difficult to swallow. Ripley not finding a way to get Newt back for 10 years is really implausible. Issue 1 ends with Falk and Tully copying Ripley's appearance from the end of Book 2 by toting gigantic guns and saying they're going to go to the alien homeworld, get Ripley's Queen Mother, and use it to destroy all the aliens on Earth once and for all. Obviously that homeworld from Book 1 wasn't the homeworld after all. More like a homeworld away from homeworld. Holiday homeworld. I'll stop now. Issue 2 shows us that Newt isn't buying Ripley's story much either. In her dreams, she's 6 again, cocooned by the aliens on LV-426, and in the dreams, Ripley never comes to rescue her. Meanwhile on Earth, we're introduced to the little girl Amy, her father, and Paul the cameraman. Wasn't he called Ray? Maybe Ray's dead. Still surviving the all-consuming alien plague. The father has a gun with 3 shots. 1 each if it comes to that. Paul is all for ending their misery right now, seeing as along with the alien invasion, the climate is changing, below freezing in the middle of summer. Though obviously not cold enough for him to put a jacket on over his yellow tank top, which miraculously stays the same colour for 2 whole pages. Amy's father doesn't want to hear Paul's griping because he's sure someone is watching their video broadcasts. And as luck would have it, someone is. Newt watches as the 3 of them sneak around an alien hive, finding a queen, and are attacked by a decrepit alien host, the chestburster popping out, which Amy uses their only 3 bullets to kill. They run off and the video link is cut. Newt realises the only way to rescue Amy is to go along with Ripley's plan. Ripley and Hicks are talking over the plan, and in some more sloppy dialogue, Hicks says he's had enough of Ripley's suicide missions. What suicide missions? There was only ever one suicide mission when Ripley rescued Newt over a decade earlier, and he wasn't even part of it. He was chilling on the dropship the whole time. Alright, not chilling, he was wounded, but either way. In fact, it ends up being 15 years earlier when Ripley mentions she's had the jockey's vision in her head that long, meaning the first 2 comic series somehow spans 5 years. But Amy doesn't appear to have really aged on Earth that much. I digress. Hicks isn't interested in signing up to Ripley's show, leaving her short a command-rated pilot. So Hicks, a corporal, is rated to fly a ship with a gravity drive, but Ripley, the one with the commercial pilot's license, was one of the pilots of the Nostromo, can't. How did Ripley, Falk and Tully fly around after they offed Hankerson? Hicks reviews the Sulaco mission logs in a bout of self-pity and ends up changing his mind and offering to pilot the mission after all. A modified dropship is kitted out with a large pod strapped to the bottom, which is lined with the heads of dead aliens. Partly to stop alien acid, but mostly to make the Queen Mother feel at home once they capture her. Why Ripley wants to make her comfortable isn't made clear, nor is what would happen if acid got on the viewing window or the rear hatch. They launch a badly drawn dropship with all weapons deployed from something that is supposed to be Gateway, but looks nothing like Gateway whatsoever. The interior of the dropship, packing an APC as well, has the dimensions of the TARDIS, with stacks of room for Ripley, Newt, Hicks, Falk, Tully, and a bunch of volunteer soldiers who were stranded on Gateway. Ripley explains that the plan is to capture the Queen, bring it back to Earth, where she'll call all her children to her, and then they can nuke them with the bombs Arona was going to unleash in Book 1, but apparently didn't. All this sloppiness is increasingly making the reader not care enough to notice that the climate change on Earth is from plasma energy. Plasma energy from space. Meanwhile, over in issue 3, a big slab of spaceship is orbiting a planet, with Newt bringing us up to speed about how it took a few days to travel hundreds of light years to the homeworld. Turns out this ship is their ship, and the dropship they left in didn't have to fly the whole way under its own steam. Also explains the TARDIS size thing in the last issue. They fly down to the planet and the APC with Hicks driving departs looking for the Queen Mother. They find a big round egg pod thing with organic spokes to 5 surrounding pods. Falk and some other cannon fodder don suits that are part armour, part power loader, mostly loader, and are about as useful as they stand around waiting to be torn to pieces by the Queen's Royal Guards when they emerge from the 5 surrounding pods. The APC, which was right next to the pod seconds earlier, is now inexplicably half a mile away and has to drive to pick up the only survivor, Falk. Of course, the Royal Guards start attacking the APC and rupture its reactor cooling system. Don't you hate it when that happens? Ripley suits up in one of the loader suits and jumps out of the APC, which speeds off towards the LZ. An alien smashes the windscreen and Newt gives it a cannon to the face. Of course, with no acid damage. Ripley starts chopping up the spokes connecting the pods to the central pod thingy, and the Queen Mother emerges all, "Oh no you didn't." Ripley smacks it in the face, then radios the dropship for a pickup. Meanwhile, the APC, about to explode, drives into a tsunami of thousands of aliens running towards the Queen Mother. Hicks, Tully, Falk, Newt, and some nameless likely to be dead soon guy bail out and are completely surrounded by a wall of aliens. Doing a spot of fishing for aliens, the Queen Mother bites one of Ripley's loader claws as the dropship arrives. Brewster, the pilot, constantly complains about having nowhere to land. Can a dropship not land on completely flat terrain covered in nothing but ankle-deep water? He opens the hatch to the special alien head pod, while Ripley extends her non-bitten loader hand and latches on. Retracting both claws, she draws the Queen Mother into the dropship pod. Showing how much of a complete wuss the Queen Mother is, it doesn't lift a finger to go after Ripley as she exits out of the side hatch. Then shortly after, we find out why it didn't lift a finger. It doesn't have any. Just a couple of pathetic looking tentacles and 2 legs. Ripley holds Brewster at gunpoint to go and pick up the others, including the unnamed dude who surprisingly isn't dead. I don't know what he was worried about. The thousands of aliens surrounding Hicks and co are politely lining up to be shot and being very careful no one gets acid on them, and then they back off and make room for the dropship to land, instead of, tearing it to shreds like they did on the first homeworld in Book 1. With seconds to spare, they take off and the APC, wherever it went, blows up. Issue 4 starts with John Bolton giving us false hope for the 4th time with another nice cover. We're back with Paul the cameraman, Amy, and her dad. They've been on the run from the aliens and the humans working for the aliens to gather hosts for some weeks. The satellite uplinks have been severed and they're not making any more broadcasts. It's still cold and they're holed up in what appears to be an abandoned amusement park. Of course, an alien shows up. Paul runs with Amy while her father smacks the alien with a piece of wood, of all things. He also runs only to see Paul and Amy taken away by zombie-like humans who inexplicably manage to avoid becoming hosts. Arriving back at badly drawn Gateway, Ripley tells Newt that the Queen Mother knows what Ripley's plans are, and doesn't care. Not really much of a survival instinct. Captain McQuaid, the commander of Gateway, explains that they've finally lost contact with Earth completely. too much interference in the atmosphere, and it's finally revealed that the space jockey that Hicks and Newt brought back to Earth at the end of Book 1 has been terraforming the planet for itself, hence the steep drop in temperature. This is all about payback for her, and Earth can rot for all she cares. She, Hicks, Brewster, Falk and Tully depart in the dropship to deliver the Queen Mother. Newt has other plans. While Ripley arrives at the mountain packing Arona's bombs and finds the detonation timers damaged, Newt steals a cargo ship in an attempt to rescue Amy. She lands in her last known location and is quickly attacked by a stack of aliens, which she handily dispatches. Guess their blood now has the pH of water. As more come, she runs, sticks her head inside an alien hive to see a queen looking back at her. No, I don't know why either. Only to be whisked away by Amy's father. He tells Newt that the aliens have Amy, but knows she's still alive because he's heard her screaming. However, the aliens have recently taken her to another location, which Newt recognises as Arona's bomb mountain, where Ripley currently is. An entire planet, and the two locations are only a few kilometres apart. What are the odds, eh? Falk and Tully finish fixing the wiring for the bombs, release the Queen Mother from the dropship, and take off, just as Newt crashes her cargo ship nearby. In a riff on the original climax to Aliens, Ripley plays a much more pissed Bishop to Newt's Ripley. Newt is going to get Amy from inside the mountain. There's a lot of talk about how the girl will help Ripley, and to a lesser extent Newt regain their dignity in humanity. And you could read more into it by saying Newt is mirroring Ripley's earlier desire to have a child without needing to give birth, because birth has become so debased thanks to the alien, and sex has become corrupted because she shagged a robot that was later robbed of his manhood by the aliens. But frankly, when you're watching a horde of aliens line up for Falk and Tully to conveniently shoot, acid blood flying everywhere and doing nothing, it all gets rather tiresome. Ripley and Newt drive the APC into the mountain, running over loads of aliens who stand by and just let it happen. The acid finally has an effect and they crash. Thankfully, they crash right next to where Amy is, apparently just standing with the Queen Mother or something. It's never quite made clear. One panel, Newt, in the middle of blasting pissweak aliens, hears a weak cry for help. The next, she has Amy in her arms. Ripley says something pithy about how it was always going to be one-on-one between her and the Queen Mother. And in the first bit that actually makes some sense in this whole mess, Ripley simply shoots it in the face. They head back to the APC wreck, and in a Deus Ex Machina, to top all Deus Ex Machinas, Ripley tells Newt about how the APC has an escape pod at the rear, which she changes the specs for on the fly with thousands of aliens bearing down on them, which shoots them back out the tunnel they came in, not even touching the sides once, into the middle of thousands more aliens outside, with only seconds to spare. Brewster sets the dropship down, picks up the pod, and they escape. Ho-hum. A double-page splash shows nuclear explosions detonating all over the world, which, to be fair, looks pretty ace. And we wrap up with Newt writing all the events in her diary. She talks about the aliens being destroyed and how they've all learned something about life and love. Slightly less cheery is Newt's assertion that the space jockey, or other as they call it, set the whole thing up. Followed Hicks and Newt back to Earth, called Ripley back to Earth when the aliens invaded, and also provided her with the location of the homeworld 15 years earlier. Not sure how that works. Anyway, it's all part of a grand plan to use Ripley to wipe out the aliens and terraform the now largely uninhabited planet for its own purposes. And even less cheery than that is the final panel showing a surviving alien with Newt questioning whether we've learned our lesson or not. We as readers sure did, especially in not judging a book by its John Bolton cover. As has been mentioned, the major problem with the whole 14-issue arc is the notion that Newt was abandoned by Hicks and Ripley. If you can get past that, it's all pretty good, in spite of the myriad aforementioned shortcomings of Earth War. Broadly speaking, while some of the details sure sucked great big balls, and if you can overlook the woeful art, the overall manner in which the saga is tied up is adequate, but overlooking the art is mighty difficult, despite the odd good panel here and there. The reception from fans was mixed. Kieth copped a lot of criticism in the letter columns, but also his fair share of praise. Whether this was indicative of the feedback as a whole, and Dark Horse printed half good and half bad, I don't know. Years later I read Neil Gaiman's Sandman, and was happy when Keith's short run finished on that too, and that was when I thought his whimsical cartoony style would fit with the subject matter. Verheiden did drop the ball to some degree on Earth War in the writing department, But the main reason I stopped buying it at issue 3 and didn't pick up issue 4 until months later was I've run out of synonyms for rubbish. Let's say I held off on finishing the series because of the highly inappropriate artwork. Book 1 and Book 2 are among the best Alien comics. Sadly, Earth War is among the worst.